In Love with the Brother-in-Law. Chapter 1 to Chapter 5. Montparnasse was one of the most potent aphrodisiac fragrances in the world. Clad in a black tight-fitting dress, Jocelyn McBride tucked her curly black hair behind her ear and revealed her porcelain-like fair face. It is said that whoever smells it will have an erotic dream at night. She stared seriously at the man before her eyes. Sebastian Davis pulled her hand away and frowned. Well, it is typical of her to be so bold and straightforward. Following that, Jocelyn draped her limbs around the man and hung onto him like a koala. Sebastian, I told you that I am here to make love to you. Are you done messing with me? Sebastian placed his hands on her back as his gaze darkened. Not yet. Jocelyn shook her head and undid 2 buttons on his shirt. You see, I've applied some Montparnasse. Don't you find it fragrant? Staring at her red and curling lips, Sebastian snorted and remarked, This fragrance doesn't suit you. It doesn't matter. Jocelyn pouted as she rubbed her head against his firm chest and snuck her hand under his pants. Before coming to this place, she had heard that this ruthless president of McBride Group was a typical insensitive man, which was why he was still single at the age of 30. Jocelyn. Sebastian growled and grabbed her hand, which was on his belt. Yeah, Sebastian. Jocelyn stared at him with her clear eyes, catching a whiff of the middle and bass notes of Montparnasse, which were mostly the scent of datura flowers. Sebastian felt a warm sensation in his abdomen. Grasping her wrist, he narrowed his eyes and questioned, Jocelyn, do you know what you're doing? Of course. Jocelyn draped her arms around his neck and batted her eyes. I am going to have sex with you. You are Joanne's sister. Sebastian scowled and pulled her away. His shirt was unbuttoned, so Jocelyn was able to stare at his broad chest as she said, So what? Well, I have to call you brother-in-law. Then, she fondled his chest with her slender fingers. His collarbones and firm chest, paired with his Apollo-esque belt and tan skin, made him one of the most masculine men she had ever seen. Why are you still trying to seduce me when you know that I am your future brother-in-law? Sebastian gazed at the little wildcat before his eyes and raised an eyebrow. I don't care, Jocelyn reiterated. Seeing that he had pinned her down on the bed but hadn't taken any action, she decided to take off his shirt. Since Joanne has snatched the man I love from me, I'll do the same to her. Otherwise, she'll think that I am a pushover. But Sebastian, are you really not interested in women? Like what the others said, I am already on the bed. Yet. Before she could finish her words, Sebastian pinned her wrists above her head. I am not interested in women. A dangerous glint flashed across his eyes as he sized up her plump bosom. Since you want to make love to me, I'll grant you your wish. Like a peach that had just ripened, the little wildcat had a young-looking face and a curvy figure. He was a straight man, so there was no way he would put up with her provocation. Since she wants me so badly, I will give her what she wants. As he got a sniff of the patchouli scent wafting from her body, he could feel his heart pounding against his chest. Lowering his head, he was about to lock his lips with hers. Just then, Jocelyn sat up straight and hit her forehead against his. While he was covering his forehead, she fished out her phone and took photos of his naked body before leaping off the bed. As she dashed out of the room, she threw a flying kiss at him and beamed. Sebastian. See ya. Sebastian's expression darkened in an instant. How dare she set me up? When he tried to grab her, she had already sprinted out of the room. Damn it. After the little wildcat was out of his sight, Sebastian scowled and found that his throat felt extremely dry. So he turned around and stepped into the bathroom. Jocelyn. When Jocelyn reached the elevator, she came across 2 people she didn't want to meet: her stepmother, Nadine Jacobson, and her sister, Joanne McBride. Knowing that she couldn't flee, Jocelyn decided to lean against the wall. I didn't believe it at first when other people told me that you were seducing Sebastian. Now that you've been caught red-handed, how are you going to explain yourself? You're such a slut. How could you sleep with Sebastian? Why are you doing this to Joanne? Nadine pointed at her and snarled. PFFT. Jocelyn laughed in exasperation. Yes. He is Joanne's fiancé. But we all know how this engagement came about. When Jocelyn was still in her mother's womb, her grandfather, Josh McBride, had decided that she would get married to Sebastian in the future. However, Jeremy McBride later found a new wife, Nadine, who made Josh change his mind. Long story short, Sebastian and Joanne were going to get engaged next month. Jocelyn couldn't tolerate it, so she decided to hook up with Sebastian. As expected, Nadine and Joanne came to the hotel to catch them in the act. Have you ever looked at yourself in the mirror? Don't you realize you're not a good match for Sebastian? Nadine poked Jocelyn's head with her index finger. Her fingernails were covered with red nail polish. You're just a girl with poor academic results. You're not even remotely comparable to Joanne. Feeling pain on her forehead, Jocelyn slapped away Nadine's hand and scowled. Don't touch me. You're seducing Sebastian because you're jealous of Joanne. How could there be such a shameless woman like you? So what? Jocelyn lifted her chin and shrugged. You also know that Sebastian has never slept with any woman before. But he is willing to make love to me. It goes to show that I am the one he loves. How dare you talk back? Why wouldn't I dare to? Jocelyn shot her a glare and turned to leave. All of a sudden, Joanne said coldly, Jocelyn, you're just jealous because Lucas loves me. Not you. She kept a gentle smile on her face. To everyone else, Joanne was a beautiful girl with excellent academic results, while Jocelyn was an immoral and lowly girl. Even if Joanne were to seduce Lucas Kent, everyone would think that it was Jocelyn's fault. Oh, well, you can keep that jerk to yourself. I don't care. However, Sebastian has fallen in love with me, and this fact will never change. Jocelyn, this is just your one-sided story. Do you seriously think you can retaliate on me by seducing my fiancé? You're just like your brainless mother. Sebastian is right inside the room. Why don't we ask him whether he loves a B***** like you? Joanne curled up her lips. In an instant, Jocelyn's eyes turned bloodshot. I want to allow you to humiliate my mother. What a poor girl. Jocelyn, you'll be chased out of the family one day, just like your mother was. As long as I am here, I'll never go easy on you. Trembling in fury, Jocelyn landed a loud slap on her face. Shut up. Joanne's head was jerked to the side from the impact. Just when she wanted to rebuke Jocelyn, she suddenly put on a pitiful expression and said, Jocelyn, why did you slap me? Jocelyn couldn't bear to see how pretentious her sister was. No matter what happened, everyone would be fooled by her pretense and think that it was all Jocelyn's fault. Before Jocelyn could finish her words, she felt a slap on her face. Then she fell to the ground. The slap was so powerful that she was seeing stars and couldn't come to her senses for a moment. When her vision cleared up, she saw that Jeremy was consoling Joanne with his hands on her shoulders while he shot a disdainful look at her. How dare you try to seduce your sister's fiancé? I wouldn't have found out how shameless you could be if I hadn't come here. How could you slap your sister when you're in the wrong? I don't want to see you again. Still sitting on the ground, Jocelyn felt that half of her face was numb. With a dispassionate expression, she stared at the three people before her eyes. At that moment, Nadine was looking at her with a smug smile. Meanwhile, Joanne was pretending to be sorrowful, and Jeremy was glowering at her. Jocelyn felt like they were one family while she was the outsider. Ignoring the pain, Jocelyn got to her feet and straightened up before turning around. Staring at her leaving figure, Jeremy growled, Jocelyn, come back here and apologize to your sister. Apologize to her. Jocelyn snorted and thought that she would rather die than apologize to that B*TCH. I don't have time for you. Bye. Upon finishing her words, she stepped into the elevator. After entering a bar, Jocelyn fished out her phone and posted some intimate photos on Twitter. Jocelyn the Beautiful, oh, no. I've slept with my brother-in-law. Jocelyn was a C-list actress who was already infamous for her behavior. Now that she had slept with the successor to Davis Enterprise, also her future brother-in-law Sebastian Davis, she became the center of criticism in an instant. However, she didn't care as long as she could embarrass Joanne. The bartender, Talia Greenwood, made her a glass of pear martini and clapped her hands. Your pretentious sister should be blowing her top by now. Ha ha. However, you should have made love to Sebastian. Do you know that he is one of the most desired men in the country? If I were you, I would have betted him. I am not as slutty as you are. Jocelyn waved her hand as her expression turned serious. I'll give my first time to the man I love. I don't love him. Talia widened her eyes in disbelief upon hearing that. What? You are a virgin? Jocelyn's face blushed in an instant. Due to her mother's death, she felt insecure when it came to love. During her high school days, she was aggressively pursued by Lucas Kent. At that time, she was just an inexperienced girl, so she agreed to his pursuit without much thought. Yet she couldn't bring herself to have sex with him. However, she didn't expect that Joanne successfully hooked up with him just by sending him some nudes. That is not the main issue now. Jocelyn's face turned a shade redder. Joanne is a shrewd woman. If I can't get together with Sebastian, Seeing that Jocelyn was clenching her fists, Talia straightened up and paid attention to what she was about to say. However, Jocelyn didn't even know what she should say, so she landed a slap on the table and growled, I'd change my surname to Davis. Well, you'd get his surname if you got married to him. But that old man is unromantic. And he is infamous for being a typical insensitive man. I want to get married to such a man. Jocelyn shook her head repeatedly. Are you still looking for the man who saved you before? Talia shook the cocktail in her hand and tilted her head. He hasn't come to this bar for a long time. Jocelyn touched the necklace on her neck. A glass button was hung as a pendant on the necklace. Previously, she was molested by some drunk men in this bar. It was a man in a black suit who saved her. Amidst the chaos, she accidentally pulled out a button from the man's shirt. Since then, the man never came to this bar again. So she hadn't seen him for a long time. He is just someone who saved me before. Anyway, I don't love Sebastian. Jocelyn's intention was to make Sebastian fall madly in love with her so that she could make Joanne's blood boil. After making up her mind, she gulped down the cocktail and called Sebastian. When the call was connected, she said in a soft tone, Sebastian, I am drunk. She spoke in a languid voice as she swung her legs under the table. Upon hearing that, Sebastian closed his laptop and leaned against the chair before replying in a dispassionate manner. Tell your family members to fetch you since you're drunk. With a blushing face, Jocelyn pouted. No, I want you to come over. Sebastian shook his head as he recalled that their intimate photos had caused some brouhaha in the city. I haven't settled the score with her. So how could she come teasing me again? I'll hang up the call now if there is nothing else. He didn't want her to keep messing with him. Sebastian, how could you leave me here in this bar? Some bad people might come to bully me at any moment. Jocelyn straightened up and placed her hand on her hip. Unexpectedly, she hit the man behind her, causing the glass in his hand to fall to the ground and break into pieces. Are you blind or what? Right before Sebastian hung up the call, he could hear Jocelyn's scream and a man's rude insults. It was in the middle of the night. When he rose from the chair and saw that the clock on the wall had struck midnight, he pulled on his tie in an impatient manner. Whether or not she is in trouble, it has nothing to do with me. After stepping into his bedroom, he lay down on the bed and closed his eyes. However, he just couldn't fall asleep as he kept tossing and turning on the bed. Suddenly, he got off the bed and put on his coat before shuffling out of the house. When Matilda Holland, Sebastian's housekeeper, saw him, she asked, "Where are you going?" "I have something to do." Upon finishing his words, Sebastian got into his car and left the place. Matilda was shocked by the speed at which he drove the car. Sebastian had always been a calm man. The last time she saw him so anxious was when the incident 5 years ago happened. Soon, Sebastian reached the bar. However, after he searched around the place, Jocelyn was still nowhere in sight. Frustrated, he thought, "Damn it. No matter how arrogant she is, she is a young girl after all. If I didn't hesitate to help her, she would have been safe." With a scowl, he went on with the search as he grew more apprehensive by the minute. Eventually, when he reached the end of the corridor and was about to go upstairs, he saw a petite figure in the corner. It was Jocelyn. Seeing her, he let out a sigh of relief, even though he didn't know why he felt this way. Upon seeing Sebastian, Jocelyn spread her arms and beamed at him. "Sebastian, I want a hug." In an instant, Sebastian's expression turned impassive as he tucked his hands in his pockets and remained on the spot. Keeping the smile on her face, Jocelyn swung her fair arms. "Sebastian." However, Sebastian remained silent with a grim expression. "You see, I am bleeding now," Jocelyn said in a small voice. "She is hurt." Sebastian lowered his head to examine her. The woman was sitting in a dark corner as her eyes reflected the light coming from another room. Her eyes had welled up with tears, but she still smiled at the man. Feeling sorry for her, Sebastian heaved a sigh and lowered his body before carrying the petite woman up. "Sebastian, you are the best," Jocelyn spoke as she draped her arms around his neck. When Sebastian caught a whiff of the sweet scent of pear martini in her breath, he paused for a moment as his body grew hotter. Following that, he drove her to the nearest hospital. After footing the medical bill, he rushed to the consultation room and saw her gazing at him in a pitiful manner, her arm wrapped in bandages. Feeling anxious, he turned to look at the doctor. "How is she?" The doctor raised his head and sized the man up. His inquisitive gaze made Sebastian feel uncomfortable. "Fortunately, you sent her to the hospital in time. If she had come any later," the doctor shifted his attention to Jocelyn, who was sitting in an upright position. "Her wound would have healed." It was then Sebastian realized that Jocelyn was beaming at him with her protruding canine teeth shown. On his way to get his car, he remained silent, for he felt that he had been fooled by that woman again. At that moment, he found his worry and anxiety laughable. She is just an infamous C-list actress and a student with poor academic results. I shouldn't have trusted her in the first place. Jocelyn hastened her pace and got into his way. "Sebastian, are you mad at me?" The blue hydrangeas in the hospital garden had all bloomed as the pleasant scent permeated the air at night. The moon shone faintly above them, rendering the atmosphere serene. Sebastian stood beside the blue flowers as the moonlight cast his shadow on Jocelyn's petite figure. "I was really bleeding. I didn't lie to you." Indeed, the man Jocelyn crashed into had chided her. But after she pleaded with him repeatedly, his heart gradually softened as he persuaded her to stop crying. However, her arm was wounded when she accidentally came into contact with a broken piece of glass later. "Listen. I don't have the time and energy for your little games." Sebastian clenched her chin and looked into her eyes. "I am not remotely interested in you." "Are you mad at me?" Jocelyn batted her eyes. The man before her eyes was the most powerful man in the city who had destroyed countless of his opponents. At that moment, he was glowering at Jocelyn, as though he was about to gobble her up. Nevertheless, she wasn't afraid of him as she raised her hand and showed him the band-aid on her arm. "I'll show you if you don't believe me." Upon finishing her words, She tore off the band-aid on her arm. Before Sebastian could stop her, she had already done that, revealing a red heart that was drawn beside the wound on her arm. Sebastian raised his head and realized that she was looking fixedly at him. Her eyes seemed to contain all the stars in the galaxy, and her smile was as bright as the moon above their heads. At that instant, he felt his heart throbbing uncontrollably as it was completely occupied by the woman before his eyes. At 3:00 am in Fairview Villa, Sebastian was asleep when he felt someone sneaking under his quilt. So he opened his eyes and pressed his hand against the person's forehead before speaking in a cold voice. "Jocelyn, don't you try to cross the boundary." Moments ago, when he opened the car door outside the hospital, she snuck into the car and pleaded with him that she had nowhere to go. So he decided to let her stay over in his house. Unexpectedly, she had even climbed onto his bed. Now, Jocelyn crawled under the quilt and stuck out her head before pouting. In a choking voice, she said, "Sebastian, I am cold." "Get out," he demanded. Relentlessly, she lay on top of him and touched his chest. "I am really afraid of the cold. Can you feel how cold my hands are?" She wouldn't release him as she even tried to wrap her legs around his like an octopus. "My legs are cold as well." When Sebastian grabbed her legs and was about to rebuke her, he noticed that her legs were indeed as cold as ice. While he was startled, Jocelyn wrapped her hands around his waist and got into a comfortable position. "Sebastian, don't worry. I won't do anything to you. I just want to sleep with you," she uttered. Sebastian's gaze darkened. What on earth is on her mind? Feeling impatient, he tried to pull her hands away. "Why do you always climb onto a man's bed? A girl shouldn't be so easy." Upon finishing his words, he realized that she wasn't moving anymore as the atmosphere turned awkwardly silent. He was about to get engaged to Joanne, so he wanted to lecture Jocelyn on behalf of her family members. However, seeing her in her current state, he couldn't bring himself to do that. He wasn't a man who was good at consoling girls. Seeing that she remained silent, he felt that he might have gone overboard with his words. After all, she was 8 years younger than he was. Maybe I've said something wrong, he thought to himself as he fell silent. When he heard her stable breathing sometime later, he set his mind at ease and slumbered off as well. The next morning, the sunlight filtered through the window and cast its glow on the beige quilt, making both of them feel warm. Upon hearing the doorbell ringing, Jocelyn leapt off the bed to open the door before Sebastian awakened. At the entrance, Joanne, who was holding a thermal flask, froze on the spot as her smile faded. Following that, she yelled, "Jocelyn!" Shocked by her scream, Jocelyn covered her ears. Well, she has finally turned into a fishwife. Awakened by the noise, Sebastian sat up on the bed, exposing his broad chest. Jocelyn raised her eyebrow as she gleefully watched Joanne's contorting face. "Jocelyn, how could you?" Joanne was so exasperated that she couldn't finish her sentence. If it weren't because of Sebastian's presence, she would have hurled the thermal flask right at her sister's face. When she saw the intimate photos last night, she wasn't mad at all. She even sneered at the fact that Jocelyn thought she would be enraged by these photos. Thinking that Sebastian must be displeased after the scandal, she decided to prepare some soup for him to show him how considerate she was. However, she didn't expect that she would come across Jocelyn in his house in the morning. "What on earth are you trying to say?" Jocelyn questioned. If everyone could see how hideous she looks now, she would no longer be the campus belle. "You're so shameless." Joanne's eyes turned bloodshot. "How could you sleep with him when you know that he is my fiancé?" Jocelyn couldn't help but clap her hands, thinking that her sister totally deserved the Best Actress award. "Sebastian." She turned to look at the half-naked man on the bed. "I bedded my sister's fiancé. What should I do?" It was difficult to read the emotion behind Sebastian's gaze. In a dispassionate manner, He put on a shirt and buttoned up before approaching the ladies. Then, he said, "Joe, our families are closely connected. So I hope that you'll do well in your life." Seeing how gentle he was, Joanne felt hopeful. Sebastian was known to be an impassive man who treated everyone coldly, including his mother. However, he now called her Joe and even hoped that she would do well in life. Feeling jealous, Jocelyn rolled her eyes. "Joe, how intimate. HMPH. Why has he never called me Josie or something?" After giving it a thought, Jocelyn realized that she would probably be disgusted by Sebastian if he really called her Josie. Sebastian saw her rolling her eyes but decided not to settle the score with her now as he shifted his attention back to Joanne, who was looking at him lovingly. "I heard that you've gotten together with Lucas Kent. I am really glad that you've found a man you love. So I want to hold you up. Don't worry. I'll visit your parents soon and call off the engagement." "What?" Joanne turned pale in an instant. Meanwhile, Jocelyn was drinking water, and she sprayed it out on an expensive drawing when she heard that. Thanks for listening to the Bravonovel audiobook. Welcome to download the Bravonovel app. Read the novel in love with the brother-in-law online and get the latest updates.